about this. You've never been at this exact moment in this exact place as this exact version of yourself before. Whoa. I'm Bronkar Lee.
And I'm Cyndi Harvell. We believe that when we approach the journey of life with curiosity, joy, and a desire to grow, we can have a powerfully positive impact on the world around us.
Join us for conversations
and explorations
that will change your perspective,
shift your mindset,
and inspire you to get out there and spread the good stuff.
Spread that good stuff.
Hey, well, today we're going to talk about self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
And before you tune out and you're like, I'm already self-aware, we have new perspectives to share about it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting. And we have a super cool technique that actually helps you cultivate this awesome skill. And before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder that this is brought to you by the Good Stuff Network. And we are all about spreading the good stuff in the world, which means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But essentially, it's using our strengths and skills to put positive energy into the world and make a positive impact. So we have a lot of ways that you can join in with us in workshops and in live sessions. If you visit go.spreadthegoodstuff.com, you can see what's going on this month.
Spread that good stuff.
Come on. That was a little off key, wasn't it?
I like it.
So today we're talking about self-awareness.
Yep.
And I love starting the conversation out with like why it's important to have it. Because like, you know, I think for years and years and years maybe even, I went around with like assuming that maybe I was self-aware, but not really thinking about it. And then realizing years and years and years later that I wasn't really self-aware when I was younger. But as we think about how we're showing up in the world, and especially how we're showing up in the scope of being around others, you know, families or teams or groups or whatever it is, it's important to know how we are showing up and how our actions, our behaviors, our choices, our decisions are impacting and are perceived by the people around us. Because a lot of times what happens is we do a thing or we say a thing or we act a certain way intending something, and the entire world is perceiving it differently than what we intend. So we're actually not being successful in what we're trying to do. You know, if you're trying to support someone, but everyone else reads it as you're being disrespectful, then you're not actually doing what you're setting out to do. So that's why this is an important skill, and it is a skill that can be grown and cultivated.
Yep. With deliberate practice. You know, intentional learning. And, you know, we all know that person that enters the room and then everybody kind of wants to leave the room. And then we all know those people that enter the room and people are attracted to them. And so the question to ask yourself is, which person are you? You know, and I know sometimes for me, I enter the room and people want to leave the room based upon the music, the energy that I'm broadcasting. And then hopefully more often than less, when I enter the room, people are attracted to me and they want to come towards me because the music that I'm broadcasting, the unseen energy that I'm broadcasting is good stuff. And people are attracted to that because we're either, you know, as beings, we're constantly either attracting or repelling, just like a magnet, attracting or repelling. We're always broadcasting something, right? And either it's the good stuff or the other stuff.
Don't let it be the other stuff. That's the moral of the story. But the first step really then in this equation of understanding how to become more self-aware for the better, for the good stuff, right, is being able to assess what you are, right? So being able to understand in the way that because we like music metaphors, if you've listened to us talk before, you'll probably know that, but we talk about being in tune. And what that means is that we are showing up as the best version of ourselves. We're centered and grounded, and we're ready to contribute positively to whatever situation it might be. And in music, we also call it, you know, training your ear to listen. So it's honing that skill of listening to yourself, listening to what's going on and listening to what people around you, what the signals are from them, because there are those people that come into the room, everyone scatters and they're like, what happened? Is something else going on? And they like don't really know that it was even them. Yeah. They're like, something else must be going on because it couldn't possibly be my presence in this situation. But we have a great story about this training the ear.
We have a great story.
I
so you have a great story. Yeah, here, tell it.
You're in it though.
Oh, nice.
Well, you're totally a part of the story.
I am.
Come back, please.
I'm in the story.
Bronkar and I have known each other for 20 plus years.
I think 22.
Probably. We've been together as a couple for most of those years. But when we first met each other, we were 20, 21, or maybe 19 and 20. And I had been playing guitar for maybe 3 years. And he was just learning to play guitar.
I was a drummer.
You were a drummer.
Yeah.
You had been playing a lot of other instruments for a while, but guitar, the melodic instrument, was a new instrument for you. So you were very well versed with the beats, and then this melodic instrument was, it's also rhythmic, but we don't have to get into that. But
I had no idea what melody really was. I did not understand melody.
But you were getting there.
Yeah.
You did great, babe. So there was this one instance where we were sitting together and Bronkar pulls up the guitar and he's like, hey, I've got to play this song. I've been practicing. I'm going to play my chord. He was so proud. He was so proud of himself and excited to share this with me. And he pulls out the guitar and he just starts strumming with so much passion and drive.
Yes.
And I was like plugging my ears. Like, what is this sound? This is so out of tune. Before you judge me as being rude, it was so out of tune. It was so out of tune. I had to stop him and I had to say, hey, do you want to tune your guitar first? Like, it's really not in tune. And Bronkar was like, I don't know what you mean. Like, it sounds fine.
I got the guitar. I'm playing it. This is what you do.
And so I pulled, I had my music bag with me and I pulled out my tuner. It was a little device that can help you get your instrument in tune. And for a guitar, they generally have 6 strings on them and each string is tuned to a certain note. Mm. And so I pulled it out and I proceeded to show him. And of course, the strings were way out of tune. So he's like, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. And of course, since then, I'm happy to report that his ear training has gotten phenomenally better. He is now plays lots of melodic instruments, and he now can tell me if something is out of tune or not. But there's that idea of like knowing when you're in tune or out of tune and knowing that you need to tune up. Because realistically speaking, we are not always perfect. We are not always our best selves. I mean, I'm super guilty of not always being my best self, but it's knowing when you need to shift something.
And also, I think looking at ourselves, looking at yourself as an instrument, and just like a guitar, how are you retuning yourself on a regular basis? That can be, energetically, physically, emotionally, spiritually. How are you retuning yourself, your inner instrument, on a regular basis? And, if you think about it, just like a guitar, the way you tune it is you turn the pegs, the tuning pegs, and it creates either more tension on the string, right? Revs it up and tenses it more to lift the pitch up, or it loosens that tension and drops it down in the pitch, in the tuning. And so to think about yourself as that string, right? And then think about, are you too tense right now in your life today, in this moment? Are you overwhelmed, stressed, anxious? Are you running tight because too much tension can pop that string, right? Or are you a little bit flat? Are you low in your tuning? Are you out of tune with lack of energy, passion, purpose, inspiration, right? Because then you're down. But what we want to find is not too tense, not too loose, but just right in that Goldilocks zone, right? Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. And so looking at yourself as that instrument and the importance of retuning your inner instrument on a regular basis. And the other note inside of that is when you have a stringed instrument like a guitar or a cello or a violin, you want to retune that every time you play. You want to retune that on a daily basis. A professional musician retunes his or her instrument every single time they play it. Every time they take it out of the case, the first thing they do is retune. If you've ever seen a band play, the first thing everybody's doing is retuning. A symphony, they're all retuning their instruments individually first before they come together as a collective to then harmonize and make beautiful music together. And the thing is that the longer you wait to retune your instrument, the more out of tune it can be. And so, like in that situation, that particular guitar hadn't been tuned in a long time. And so it took a while to get it into tune. If you leave your inner instrument out of tune for too long, you might have to change the strings. You might have to go in and take all those strings off and put them all back in. And then you're starting from scratch. And it takes it's an hour-long process as opposed to just a minute of retuning quickly. So the question is how often are you retuning yourself, your inner instrument? How often are you doing that so that you're in optimal peak performance, so you're in tune every single day, every single week, every single month, every quarter, every year, so that you're showing up and making beautiful music with the people around you?
Yeah.
Period.
Amen, brother. And stop. No, that's a good point. And that the idea of staying in tune in increments rather than, and certainly you change the strings every so often. And I think that sort of, anyway, and I think that sort of equates to us as humans needing, larger tune-ups, so to speak, right? Where we need that weekend away, or we need that, massage, or we need the bigger thing rather than just the 5-minute meditation. But the balance is to not get to the point where you totally break, right? So like keeping in touch with what you need in the moment, and that understanding of yourself, that complete self-awareness.
That's self-awareness. Yeah.
And then the idea of self-awareness and being in tune, what happens is it translates, or it it sort of filters out, so to speak, into the actions. Why is this important? Well, it's the actions that we are taking. It is the responses that we have in situations. Whether we respond to a frustrating situation with a short fuse, or whether we can stay grounded and balanced and know what's going on and have an understanding of why we are reacting to a situation. And this is part of that cultivation of the skill, and the idea of, well, let me actually pause and share. Yeah. I was going to share a definition because it would help us move forward.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, instead of the retuning and then your definition, is that it can be like simple things. And again, our oath of possibility is to, we've never been at this place, this time, as this exact version of ourselves before. We give ourselves permission to explore, to be curious, to hear new information with an open mind, old information from a new perspective, and to be reminded of things we may have forgotten. And with that oath of possibility at the forefront, this could be a reminder for you that it's like, maybe I need a little more sleep. Maybe I need a little less food. Maybe I need to shift my nutritional intake slightly. Maybe I need to incorporate a little more of a fun hobby. Whatever that is, it's these little tiny subtle retunings of your activities that can help to keep you in tune. So I just wanted to make that note before you jump into the self-awareness.
Got it. When I was kind of looking around the internets for a definition of how do people think of self-awareness, because a lot of times we come to a topic with the assumption that everybody's on the same page with a term and what it means, and then you go from there, and then everybody's lost. So coming back to what does that actually mean through the lens of some other people, and I found a couple of good quotes. Debbie Ford says, self-awareness is the ability to take an honest look at your life without attachment to it being right or wrong. So this is a tough one. This is a tough one to be non-judgmental or unbiased about what we are doing. But it's so powerful when you can step away from yourself to get that outside perspective on and this is something that we use a lot, this place of curiosity.
Yeah.
I wonder why I did that. I wonder why I reacted in that way. That's interesting. I really blew up in that argument. Like, I wonder why. Oh, I see. I was actually frustrated about XYZ. I was thinking about this other thing. I was really hungry and I just blew up because I wasn't in a grounded place, you know?
And that, are you leading us into theater view?
Go ahead. I will, yes.
Because that's theater view technique.
Right.
And that was one of the points of this episode. But like the theater view technique is TVT, theater view technique. And basically that's the theater view technique is, so I do a lot of live performance for those of you who don't know. And every time I come to a conference center or a performing arts center or theater, when I'm sound checking, I take a moment to go out into the audience and I sit in different seats in the theater, sometimes up in the balcony, sometimes all the way in the back, sometimes in the front row, different angles so that I can see the stage from different perspectives because everybody is seeing the same show from a different perspective, which creates a unique experience for every audience participant. And so that theater view is something that can be really powerful when it's incorporated into our lives, when we can pause what's going on and we can actually go outside because we're on stage, right? Like my life is my theater show. Your life is your theater show. And you're on stage in your show. I'm on stage in my show. But when we can pause on stage and then we can go out into the theater and look at ourselves from an outside perspective, suddenly we see things that we didn't even know existed. We might see behaviors that we're engaging in or energy that we're broadcasting, things that we're doing that we're proud of or that are less preferred and we'd like to improve upon. And so being able to shift our perspective and get that theater view shift there can really add a lot of self-awareness to our lives.
Yeah. And it's a practice because, you know, it is tricky. And we've had people ask us before, how do I do that? How am I supposed to be non-judgmental about myself? Like it's really easy to say, and then it's way harder in practice, but it is practice. So it is a practice of using that, invoking that childlike curiosity and pausing. I mean, like it's literally taking a pause if you can, or a lot of times we use the technique, and I'll walk through like the specifics of the technique. But a lot of times we use the technique in retrospect to analyze a situation because we're farther from it. We're not in the heat of the moment. So we can look back at it and say, what happened there in that moment and why, and how can I do it differently next time? Yeah. You know, and then as you practice this, as you get better and better at not being gentle with yourself, truly, like being compassionate and separating from yourself a little bit, then it becomes easier to invoke in the moment. And I can share an example. I want to walk through because there's actually 5 specific steps that are super helpful. Do you mind if I walk them through? So the first step is, and I'll say the 5 right now. It's notice, define, separate, question, recalibrate. Notice, define, separate, question, recalibrate. And the first piece is notice, and that is actually being aware. We're starting with that ping of noticing when there's a negative reaction or a response to something. And as we think about this, like, you know, imagine a situation that you might have had yesterday or earlier in the day. Like, let that come to your awareness of, oh, that was a situation I could have done better. Yeah. So now we're looking at it and we're sort of breaking it apart. Whether it was an argument or a fight or a challenging person at your workplace or a fight with your spouse or an argument with your child or whatever. And the next piece is to define the emotion really specifically. Like, what is the emotion that you were feeling in that moment? Mm-hmm. Where, you know, because like if you've ever dived more deeply into feelings, there's something that you can Google and look up called the feelings wheel. And it's a really interesting tool that we were introduced to when we started our parenting journey from a parenting session that I can't even remember. I think we both did, or I did. But the feelings wheel is like, I don't even know how many, a couple hundred feelings that are arranged in a wheel. And there's the center of the wheel has, I think, 6 of the most common emotions that we say. So it's like sad, happy, angry.
Yeah.
There's a couple others, you'll have to look at it, but like those are the most common ones. And it's like we use angry, I was angry, I'm happy, sad. And those are so broad that they encompass so many other like more specific feelings. And so as you look outward on the wheel, you see more and more of the feelings that fall under that. So angry could actually be annoyed or frustrated or bitter or resentful. Mm-hmm. So there's the more specific, the reason I'm saying this is that the more specific that we can be about what the feeling is, the more easily we can address the solution. Yeah. I mean, it's not that different than going to the doctor and being like, I have a bum knee or whatever. Oh, well, it's because of this or this or this. It's not just the knee, but like, what is the specific of, I was really resentful of you for doing this specific thing. And now in order to actually create a better reaction next time, this is the solution.
Yeah. Notice, define, separate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Separate.
So separate, you're nudging me on to the next one. Get on there, Cyndi. So separating yourself from the emotion. This is that non-judgmental piece, right? So separating myself from that to get the perspective. I mean, really imagine yourself going out, imagine yourself on a stage. And if you want, you should Google images of theaters so that you can kind of get the feeling of being on a stage and looking out if you've never done that before.
Yeah, because there's the orchestra pit, like the front row.
Yeah.
Then there's like, the balcony a lot of times, being on the right or the left, depending on where you're at, it can really, it really changes the perspective of the show.
And so if you can like actually imagine yourself walking off of the pausing, like freezing time, like you have a magical device that will freeze time, walk out into the seats and look back from a different view, it's kind of it's a interesting exercise. And like, what would somebody else see if they saw me in that interaction just now? What would they see when they would be like, oh, wow, she's crazy? Or like, what would they think? So
and I've actually done that with video before. And I've accidentally done that with the way that I parent I remember one time I think you shot a video and it was me engaging with the boys. And then I did something that was, that I wasn't necessarily proud of. And I was like, oh man, dude, I totally that was not the right way to handle that situation. It was an accident, but that was literally capturing a moment on a device. And then the future version of myself watched the past version of myself and was like, whoa, that wasn't cool at all. And then in that moment, I was able to then kind of recalibrate and say, all right, that I'm not going to do that again. I don't know if I've ever done that again, but I was definitely self-aware of that. And I really was conscious to try not to do that again.
So anyway, we should just go video everything.
Video everything, yeah. So you should have a full-time life videographer following you around, and then you should spend all of your sleeping hours watching yourself back. Yeah.
Okay, scratch that.
Okay.
But perspective is like, it's a powerful, like when you start thinking about like, your own. Our kids are little, so our kids are 4 and 6 right now. And when you think about their experience as literally being, below, like we have a tall kitchen counter and they're always climbing on it. And we're like, stop climbing on this counter. And it's like, they're below it. They can't see what's up there. Yeah. So of course they're climbing on it. When you think about like, if you actually squat down and you're like, this is how they see things.
In
like
fact,
this is so different.
If they didn't climb the counter, something would be wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like you'd be like, why are you not curious? Why do you not want to jump up here and be involved with the happenings?
Yeah. And when you start to acknowledge that, like we all know that there's different perspectives, but when you start to really become conscious of, like when you're watching the video of yourself, this is how I look from when I'm doing that thing from over here.
Yeah.
Like, that's different than what I was feeling in the moment.
It's like when if you've ever had a picture taken of you when you weren't ready, when you weren't like on and you were like, hey, it's like, that's what you look like when you're not taking a picture. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what people are seeing all the time.
So like every picture you take of me where I'm like, like just.
That's what you look like.
So the next step in the piece is we've got notice, define, separate, and now we're at question. So this is where we invoke that curiosity that we were talking about. And we say, I wonder why. I wonder why I did that. Like we sort of have this, we have our scientist lab coat that we talk about sometimes. We put on our lab coat and our goggles, and we're like,
Curiosity coat, gratitude goggles.
Yeah, not the gratitude goggles here, just the lab goggles. These are strictly scientific lab goggles.
Oh, that's right.
Not gratitude goggles.
So we can learn from the past.
That's a different one.
Learn from the past, apply to the present, become the future. Sorry, we have a lot of acronyms. So, yeah.
But we're dissecting, the actual recipe to what led me to that response in that moment, and literally dissecting like what did I eat? Did I sleep well? Was I thinking about another thing? Was I in a hurry for something? What did I just have another terrible reaction to, or another terrible interaction with someone? I think of our son, Nico, he's 4 right now, and he's so passionate and wonderful and beautiful, and he gets easily set off by a negative interaction, and then he sort of has a hard time. It's sort of like there's like fire burning in the wake, he has one fight with his brother, and then suddenly he loses it, and every interaction becomes, and you have to kind of stop him and like whatever. So what? We love him. He's so special. But what was going on in the moment, before that moment or that led up to that moment. A brilliant thing that Bronkar said the other day, let me go ahead and acknowledge,
I'm listening.
Is that I was like, you have to ask why. And then you keep asking why to get to the root cause of why that thing happened. And Bronkar said, yes, you have to be wise with the 3 whys.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, so always be wise with the 3 whys.
Which is like a spelling, like a play on words, right? Be wise with the 3 whys.
We get it.
I have my moments. I'm not super punny, but every once in a while, it's probably happened 3 times in our relationship, and that was one of the times.
3 whys.
Yeah. Be wise with the 3 whys.
So
you ask why.
So you ask why, and then you ask the idea is you're getting deeper, but why did that happen? And then why, so you kind of get to the root of the thing so that you can really correct what was going on there for the next time that situation comes up. Yeah. And then the final one is recalibrate, which is just that, correct. Like, how can you course correct? How can you do things differently? Eventually, you use this technique as you reflect. That's the word I was looking for. As you reflect on an earlier situation, like maybe it's the end of the day and you're thinking back about a thing. And then eventually you get used to using this so that you can do it in the moment of it happening, so that you can actually course correct before there's an explosion. Yeah. And I think about, I can share a specific example that happened a couple of weekends ago. Bronkar was traveling for a theater show. Speaking of theaters.
Doing my theater technique.
He was doing it in real time. But he was traveling and for the weekend, and I was solo parenting our boys, 4 and 6-year-old. And I was...
Wait, could you tell them their ages one more time?
4 and 6.
You said it so many times. I'm like, they are? Yeah, they're 4 and 6. Go ahead.
And so I had them, it was maybe Saturday morning. I was really trying to get an exercise workout in. I mean, I was trying so hard. And every moment that I would put on a shoe or put on a sock or put my hair in the ponytail, the boys would start fighting. And so it was almost like a comedy show. Like there was a slow motion of me trying to just literally do a jumping jack or something. And everything was against me. It felt like it was never, I'm talking over the course of a couple of hours. And
yeah, you spent a couple of hours trying to start exercising for a 10-minute exercise.
Yeah. And something kept coming up. I'm thirsty. Oh, I need this. Oh, I need that, whatever. So, or fighting. And so we get to the moment where I finally get them happy. I finally get them outside. They have some sidewalk chalk. I've got my workout space and I'm about to start working out. And by the way, we also have a time container because we have somewhere to be in 30 minutes. So I'm like, this is happening now or never. And literally the moment where they were in a happy place, Bronkar calls to see how we're doing. He misses us.
From the other side of the country.
So he FaceTimes, tries to FaceTime. I try to answer and
you blocked it.
No, I didn't. I tried to answer. It didn't work. So I turned it off and I was like, okay, that's not happening. Let me go. Because it was a moment of like, now I'm going to go press play on my workout video on my phone. He calls again.
Yeah, of course.
And of course I'm like, oh, so like that didn't work. He wasn't connecting either. So like I wait for a second. Okay, he's not going to call back. Going to press play on my video. And the phone rings again.
Call back again.
But he calls back on a regular phone so that it goes through. And I picked up the phone and I said, what do you want? And literally, like, the time is ticking. I have like 25 minutes now to exercise and then shower and get ready to go. And he's like, I wanted to see you guys. I miss you guys. I wanted to see you. And there was this moment right here where I invoked the theater view technique in the scope of like 10 seconds.
In just a matter of seconds.
I noticed that I was having a response that from his perspective was totally like, what did I do to get this response from Cyndi? And in that moment, I said, okay, I'm feeling frustrated. I was saying this in my head. And then out loud, I said to him, hey, I'm not angry with you. I'm frustrated because I'm trying to exercise. The boys have been fighting all morning and we're about to leave to go out. And he said, okay, I'll hang up. Like, I'll talk to you later. Go exercise. And that was it. And like what could have happened in the alternative reality, I don't know why I pronounced it that way, but in that alternative reality, it could have been an explosive fight of like, why do you always call at the wrong time? Well, I'm just trying to, I don't know. It could have been back and forth.
If there was self-unawareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say that because this has been, honestly, this technique has been, probably a couple of years in the practice, of like using this and really fine-tuning it and being able to use it in the moment of it happening. And certainly we're not always perfect and we don't always do it, but there has been a lot of cases where we have avoided very negative interactions and arguments, or maybe we've had one and we're in it and then we're like, hold on, pause. Here's what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Let's both go to the theater and watch our show. And we're like,
yeah,
that's not the kind of show that we want to be creating in the world.
Yeah. And so we're able to recalibrate in the moment and,
And that's the cool thing is when you are in a relationship where both people are working on strengthening self-awareness, personal development, it's like then you can call each other out on it and you can really communicate and you can, that's, that harmonic effect can happen there because we can support each other and strengthen, from another perspective inside of another perspective inside of another perspective inside of another perspective, which is the inception.
And on.
And on and on. It's the infinity mirror.
That was a movie.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, well, and this is a technique that we've taught to in a lot of our programs, and people try it out and they use it for a week, and they actually consciously are using it, and it becomes one of their favorite ones. When we ask, hey, which technique did you like the best? People often call back to this one because it really is simple. It's 5 steps, but they really sort of merge together. Yeah. And it's a simple technique that eventually you're using in the moment, and it's so powerful to like shift your perspective and change the results. For the better.
Yeah, and once you practice it, it becomes automatic. It's like driving, it's like, okay, well, yeah, you have the car in the right gear, you're operating the steering wheel, you're looking at the mirrors, you're watching traffic, you're merging, you're adjusting the radio, you're doing all these things simultaneously once you train it. And it's just like, any other skill. Once you train it a little bit, then you can use it, and that recalibration happens, pretty much instantaneously. Yeah. Period.
The end.
Full stop. The end. Credits are rolling. No.
Thanks for listening to Spread the Good Stuff podcast.
If you like what you're hearing, then join our community at spreadthegoodstuff.com/community.
In addition to this podcast, the Good Stuff Network puts on group programs, live events, and retreats, all infused with music, meditations, laughter, and real authentic connections with amazing human beings.
If you got some value today, do us a favor and spread the good stuff by sharing this podcast with your friends and family.
Spread that good stuff.